Joe Bonnier from FastPitchPower.com. In this video, I want to, as quickly as I can, give you a review of some recent research that was published in February of this year that investigated the relationship between core instability and shoulder dysfunction. Obviously a very interesting topic for anyone intimately related to the performance enhancement of overhead athletes, including softball, baseball, swimming athletes, all included. The authors in this study examined the relationship between performance in 4 core strengthening exercises and a history of shoulder dysfunction, specifically a history of non-contact related shoulder dysfunction. I think it's fair to say non-contact related shoulder injury. Performance in core tests, history of shoulder injuries. Okay? Why did the authors include 4 core tests? Right, we have to agree or acknowledge that core stability is really multifactorial and it's influenced by a number of things, right? Not just performance in one muscle group. So the researchers included 4 different exercises. An exercise to examine the performance, strength, or endurance of the muscles on the front of the core, side of the core, back of the core, and then a neuromuscular control test, specifically a single leg balance test in which the athletes had their arms crossed over their body with their eyes closed. They had to stand on one leg for as long as they could, up to 45 seconds. So again, to reiterate, core stability is not just a demonstration or not just determined by performance of one muscle group, it's determined by performance of a number of muscle groups and the neuromuscular control, really of the entire body, those muscle groups included. All right. For the long story, for the details of the design and the conclusions drawn by the authors, I've included a link to the full text of this study underneath this video on the FastPitchPower.com website. So if you want to read it for yourself, go to that link. Go to FastPitchPower.com, find this post. Underneath this video is the link to the full text. So what did they find? The authors found one statistically significant relationship between performance in one of those tests and having a history of shoulder dysfunction, non-contact related shoulder injury. They found lower scores in the single leg balance test, the neuromuscular control test, static postural control test. Lower scores in the single leg balance test were associated with a history of shoulder dysfunction. So what are we to conclude? It's very easy for trainers, physical therapists, parents, and coaches to hang our hat and draw on one method and draw one-way conclusions to say that lack of neuromuscular control, deficient balance predisposes our athletes to having a non-contact related shoulder injury in the future. And that's what we want to see. It's really important to acknowledge that that's not what this study is saying. There is a relationship. They are not identifying causation. Okay? You can be of the opinion that static postural control, right, makes it difficult to acquire or exhibit dynamic postural control in something like an athletic movement like the windmill pitching sequence. I think we can agree, we can be of the opinion of that you can't stand on one leg, it's going to be hard to acquire complex motor or athletic motor skills. That's not what this study is suggesting. Right? What's also to be acknowledged is that if you want to say that lack of balance, lack of neuromuscular control predisposes an athlete to having an injury, then you also have to at least acknowledge, again, not come to the conclusion, but at least acknowledge the possibility that having an injury predisposes an athlete to having poor balance and neuromuscular control. And I'm telling you right now that that is very, very important. And it's a very real concern and something to take into consideration as a trainer, as a physical therapist, as a coach, that injury history plays a role on current fitness state. If you're only going to draw that one-way conclusion, you're going to say that lack of neuromuscular control and deficient balance predisposes an athlete to having an injury in the future, then you also have to dismiss the value of those other core exercises, and I don't think any of us want to do that. As a practitioner, I know the value of those core exercises, okay? Not on decreasing injury risk, right, on their own, but as teaching tools, as lessons in a much larger comprehensive lesson plan, teaching good postural alignment, maintenance of postural alignment in very basic, simple positions, being able to teach an athlete to maintain that postural alignment and postural control in more dynamic positions. It's one simple lesson in a much more comprehensive lesson plan. Right? But if you only want to say, based on this study, that dynamic or static neuromuscular control that influences injury risk, then you're going to have to dismiss what the authors found to not be associated with injury risk. risk, and you don't want to do that. Right? So, what we know now, parents, coaches, and athletes, neuromuscular control is important. Balance is important. Right? We need to train it. Either if you're of the opinion that it affects motor control down the road, and especially, I was so happy, this is a little bit of a tangent, I was so happy to come across this study, even if it didn't say what I wanted to say. The performance in the isolated core tests were not associated with injury risk, or injury history, I should say, clarify. Right? I wanted there to be an association, but there wasn't. Right? But at least if you have that other perspective, you see how potentially having an injury may have negatively affected one of those capacities that we agree is important, that it may influence balance, it may influence total body neuromuscular control, postural balance. I was so happy to see this because I had just posted a video for athletes with back pain, which not only included isolated flexibility and core strength exercises, but also worked you all the way up to more dynamic exercises that don't just work on strength, but again, that dynamic postural control. Because if you're going to have an injury, you need to now at least appreciate the possibility that that injury is doing more than just causing you pain. It's really insulting your fitness, your current fitness state. Right? I hope all of that gives parents, coaches, and athletes a takeaway. Neuromuscular control, balance, maintaining those things is important. Right? If you agree that it's going to be important to acquire more difficult motor skills. I hope you at least acknowledge the possibility that if you do have an injury, that you better maintain your fitness with as much as you can do in a pain-free state, like that routine that I gave you in the exercises for an athlete with back pain. In fitness, for fitness professionals and physical therapists, I hope at least I've given you a perspective to see things both ways and not to draw what we're going to call one-way conclusions. Right? See that that the authors do a really good job in this research or in this study to draw that conclusion. They just say that they identified there is a relationship, right, but they don't say that one causes the other. Right? I hope that really opened some people's eyes as to how to read research. I am not a researcher, and it's very difficult even for me to sit down with a very controlled study and come away from practical takeaway without drawing conclusions that aren't exactly what the research is suggesting. To have a very unbiased perspective, and even and to see value in a research study, even when the research study doesn't say or doesn't suggest what I initially wanted it to suggest.